The hum was the first thing you stopped hearing. It was always there, a low and steady vibration that came up through the floor and into your bones. For Jean, it was the sound of being alive on Orbital Deck 7. It was the sound of the air processors breathing, the gravity generators pulling, and the millions of lives being lived in the metal halls all around him. He had learned to tune it out years ago. His world was small now. It was the size of his apartment, the maintenance workshop 2 levels down, and the path between them. It had not always been this small. Once, it had been the size of a whole planet, with a real sky and a sun that felt warm on your skin. But that was before his wife got sick. That was before the long, quiet goodbye. Now, his world was just him and his daughter, Myri. She was 6 years old, and she was the only color left in his life. Their apartment was practical. A main room with a small kitchen area, 2 sleeping rooms, and a sanitizer unit. The walls were a soft gray. The floor was a slightly darker gray. The light from the ceiling panels was a flat, white gray. It was clean, it was safe, and it was theirs. But it was not a home that held many dreams. It was a place to sleep, to eat, and to keep Myri safe. The apartment next door had been empty for a long time. Jean was glad for the quiet. The last neighbors had been a loud group of traders from a species that communicated by clacking their hard shells together. The silence from next door was a gift. Then, one afternoon, the gift ended. Jean was helping Myri with her learning tablet when he heard the soft hiss and thud of the moving unit in the hallway. He glanced through the door viewer. A tall, slender figure was directing a cargo drone into the empty apartment. Jean pulled back. New neighbors. He felt a small twist of worry in his stomach. New people were an unknown. Unknowns could be trouble. For a few days, nothing changed. Then, Myri noticed something. "Appa, look," she said, pulling on his pant leg as they returned from the community food hall. She pointed a small finger at the neighbor's door. "It's pretty." Jean looked. She was right. Where the door had been a plain, metallic surface, it now had a pattern. It was a series of soft, glowing lines that swirled and curled into each other. The light was a calm, blue-green color. It was not bright or flashing. It was gentle like a quiet thought. It was the first unsanctioned, personal thing he had seen on the whole deck. "Don't touch it, Myria," he said softly, guiding her into their own apartment. "It's not ours." Over the next week, he saw the neighbor a handful of times. She was tall, much taller than him. Her skin had a strange quality to it. It wasn't like human skin. It looked smooth and had a faint shine, like a pearl. Her hair was not like human hair either. It was a dark, deep black, and it fell around her shoulders not in strands, but in soft, solid-looking filaments, like silk cords. She moved in a way that was completely silent and very smooth. There were no jerky motions. When she turned her head, it was a single, fluid movement. It was unsettling. Jean made sure to never make eye contact. He would look down at the floor, or busy himself with Myri, or simply turn and go back inside. He was not rude, but he was closed. His life was a fortress, and he was not letting the drawbridge down for anyone, especially not for a strange woman who glowed in the dark. His job as a maintenance technician did not help. He spent his days inside the walls of the station, fixing the machinery that kept everyone alive. He saw the wires, the pipes, the grime, and the stress points. He knew how fragile this whole metal world was. It made him see everything as a system that could break. This new neighbor was a new variable, a variable with glowing door decorations and silent movement. He did not know her function. He did not know her purpose. So, he classified her as a potential problem and moved on. Myri, however, had no such instincts. To her, the new neighbor was the most interesting thing that had ever happened. Her world was school, her appa, and their gray apartment. Now, there was a lady with shiny skin and a pretty door point one evening. Jean was cleaning their small food preparation area. Myri was playing with her stuffed toy, a worn-out earth bear she called Gom. The hallway outside was quiet. Then Jean heard it, the soft hiss of the neighbor's door opening. He froze, a cloth in his hand. He saw Myri's head snap up, her eyes wide with curiosity. A moment later, the door hissed shut. Myri scrambled to her feet and ran to their own door, pressing her eye to the viewer. "Myri, get away from there," Jean said, his voice low, but Myri was already gasping. "Appa! Appa! Come see! Sue's room has a sky inside." Jean felt a cold trickle of fear. Sue? How did Myri know her name? And what did she mean? A sky? He walked over and gently pulled his daughter away from the door. "Myri, what did I tell you? We do not spy on people. It is not respectful. But Appa, it's so beautiful. There are flowers that make their own light." This caught Jean off guard. Flowers? On a space station? Real plants were rare, kept in the central arboretum for the wealthy. The idea that their neighbor had a room full of them was impossible. Myri must have seen a video screen. It was probably just a picture on her wall. "Sweetheart," he said, trying to sound calm. "Now come on. It's time for your bath." Myri pouted but obeyed. Later, as Jean tucked her into her sleeping pod, her small voice was serious in the dark. "It was real, Appa. I saw it. It was a garden." "Okay, mira ella. Go to sleep," he whispered, kissing her forehead. But her words stayed with him. A garden, a sky. They were words from his old life, from the planet. Words that felt heavy and full of a light he missed more than he would ever admit. The next night, after Myri was asleep, Jean found himself standing by his own door. The recyclables needed to be taken to the chute at the end of the hall. It was a simple chore. A normal chore. He picked up the small bin and opened his door. The hallway was empty and quiet. The blue-green glow from Sue's door painted a soft pool of light on the floor. He walked towards the recycler, his steps echoing softly. As he passed Sue's apartment, he couldn't help himself. He glanced at her main window. His feet stopped moving. The bin of recyclables felt heavy in his hand. The window, which was usually a dark, opaque sheet, was completely clear, and Myri had been right. Inside was not a room. It was a world. The entire space was a dense, living ecosystem. The sky Myri mentioned was a holographic canopy on the ceiling, projecting a soft, twilight glow. Below it, plants of every shape and size grew from the floor, which was rich, dark soil, not metal plating. They pulsed and glowed with soft, internal light. Greens, blues, and gentle purples shifted and breathed. He saw small, shimmering shapes flitting between the leaves, insects, or maybe something else with delicate, glowing wings. And in the middle of it all was Sue. She was kneeling, her back to him. Her slender hands were gently touching the petals of a large, crystal-like flower that bloomed with a soft, white light. She was caring for it. He could see the focused, tender curve of her back. She was a gardener in a miniature, star-born forest. It was the most achingly beautiful thing Jean had seen since he left Earth. It was a piece of a living planet, right here in the cold, metal heart of the station. He stood there, frozen, for a long moment just watching. He forgot about the recyclables. He forgot about his tiredness. He just looked. Then, as if sensing his presence, Sue's head began to turn. Jin's heart jumped into his throat. He spun around, his face burning with a sudden, hot shame. He was spying. He was intruding on her private, beautiful space. He hurried down the hall, shoved the recyclables into the chute, and almost ran back to his apartment. He slipped inside and leaned against the closed door, his breath coming fast. That he was a fool. He had been caught staring into a stranger's home like a child. He felt exposed and foolish. The image of the glowing garden was burned into his mind, but now it was tied to a feeling of guilt. The drawbridge to his fortress was not just down. He had been caught standing outside it, looking in at a world he could never have. The shame stayed with Jean for days. It was a low, hot feeling in his stomach. Every time he left his apartment, he would hurry, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He was sure that Sue had seen him. He imagined her dark, knowing eyes watching him through her door viewer, judging him for his rudeness. The beautiful glow from her door now felt like an accusation. That he tried to put the whole thing out of his mind. He focused on his work, on the familiar hum of the station's inner workings. He focused on Myri. She was his reality. The glowing garden next door was a dream, and it was not his dream to have. But Myri had not forgotten. "Appa, can we visit Sue?" she asked one morning, her mouth full of nutrient paste. "No, Myria," Jean said, his voice firmer than he meant it to be. "We must not bother our neighbor." "But she has pretty flowers," Myri argued, her small face set in a stubborn look that reminded him of her mother. "We have our own home," Jean said. "It is not polite to ask." He thought that was the end of it. But a child's curiosity is a powerful thing. A few days later, Jean was repairing a faulty light panel in their main room. Myri was quietly drawing at the low table, or so he thought. When he finished his work, he saw that she was not there. "Myri?" he called, his heart giving a little jump. No answer. He stood up, a familiar panic starting to rise. He checked her small sleeping room. It was empty. The sanitizer unit was empty. Then he heard it. A very soft, muffled voice coming from near the front door. He walked over slowly. Myri was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall. She had pulled the small waste bin over and was standing on it, peering through the door's security viewer. "And the blue one is my favorite," she was whispering to herself. "I wish I could touch it." Jean felt a wave of cold dread. He reached down and gently lifted her off the bin. She gasped, her drawing tablet clattering to the floor. "Myri," he said, his voice sharp with fear. "What are you doing?" "I was just looking," she said, her eyes starting to well with tears. "I wasn't being loud." "You cannot spy on people," Jean said, kneeling down to her level. He held her by her small shoulders. "It is wrong. It is an invasion. What if Sue saw you? What if she gets angry? We do not know her. We do not know what she is like." Myri's lip trembled. "But she's nice. She smiles when she tends the flowers." This stopped Jean. "How do you know that?" "I see her," Myri said, her voice small. "Sometimes her window is open." A sick feeling settled in Jin's stomach. His daughter had been doing this more than once. He had been so careful to build walls around them, to keep them safe from the unknown. And here was his daughter, peeking through a hole in that wall every day. He felt like a failure. He was so busy protecting her from imagined dangers that he had not seen the real one. Her loneliness, her need for something more than their gray world. "That does not matter," he said, but his voice was softer now. "It is her private home. We must respect that. Promise me, Myri. No more looking." She looked down at her feet and gave a slow, reluctant nod. "I promise, Appa." He believed her, but he also knew the temptation was just a few steps away. For the rest of the day, the apartment felt smaller and grayer than ever. He watched Myri as she played, her movements listless. He had taken away her only window to wonder. That night, after Myri was asleep, Jean found he could not rest. His own words echoed in his head. "It is an invasion." But was it? He was not a bad man. He was not looking to cause trouble. He was just curious and lonely. He missed beauty. He missed the feeling of wonder that Myri had just shown him. He stood up and walked to his door. He told himself he was just checking the lock. He told himself he was just making sure the hallway was quiet. He pressed his eye to the viewer. The hallway was empty. Soa's door glowed softly, and across the way her large window was clear again. His breath caught. He knew he should turn away. He had just scolded his daughter for this exact thing. But his feet felt rooted to the spot. He was a man in a desert, and he had just found a cool, clear spring. He looked. The garden was different tonight. The holographic sky was a deeper blue, like just after sunset. The plants seemed to glow brighter in the dim light. He saw new flowers he had not seen before, ones with petals that slowly opened and closed, pulsing with a soft, golden light. He saw the small, winged creatures sleeping, curled up on broad leaves. Their glow dimmed. Then he saw Sue. She was not gardening. She was simply sitting on a smooth, dark rock, her hands resting in her lap. She was looking at her own garden, her profile calm and still. In the quiet of her room, she seemed peaceful, but also alone. It was a feeling Jean knew very well. He watched her for a long time. He watched the way the light from the plants played on her pearlescent skin. He watched the serene expression on her face. This was not some strange alien ritual. This was a person finding peace in her home, just like he tried to find peace in his in that moment. She did not seem strange or threatening. She seemed familiar. The next evening, Jean came home from work tired. It had been a long day of fixing a broken water reclaimer. Myri was happy to see him, chattering about her day at the childcare module. As he listened, he made a decision. It was a small decision, but it felt very big. He went to the small food storage unit and took out 2 of the fruit packs he saved for special treats. They were real fruit, from Earth, and they were expensive. Myri, he said, get your jacket. Her eyes went wide. Are we going out? We are going to see our neighbor, he said. A huge smile broke out on Myri's face. She scrambled to get her jacket, almost tripping in her excitement. Jin's own heart was beating fast. This was probably a mistake. She would probably not even answer the door. He led Myri out into the hall. They stood in front of the glowing door. The swirling patterns seemed to pulse slowly. Jin took a deep breath. He raised his hand and pressed the chime. They waited. For a moment, nothing happened. Jin was about to turn around, a mix of relief and disappointment washing over him. Then, with a soft hiss, the door slid open. Sue stood there, tall and serene. Her dark, filament-like hair was tied back. She looked down at them, her large, dark eyes moving from Jin's nervous face to Myri's excited one. Jin's mind went blank. All the words he had practiced vanished. He just stood there, holding the 2 fruit packs. Frozen.it was Myri who spoke. She took a small step forward, looked up at the tall alien woman, and gave a little bow. Hello, Myri said, her voice clear and bright. My name is Myri. This is my appa, Jean. We live next door. We brought you a gift because your garden is very beautiful. The silence in the hallway felt heavy and long. Jean stood frozen, his arms still slightly extended, offering the fruit packs. He felt like a fool. This was a terrible idea. He was bothering a peaceful woman with a cheap gift, all because his daughter had seen her garden. Sue's dark eyes looked at the fruit packs. Then they looked at Jin's face. Her expression was impossible to read. There was no smile, but there was no anger either. It was simply calm. Jean was sure she was about to politely close the door. Then, she moved. Her slender hand reached out, not to take the fruit, but to gesture gently for them to come inside. Please, she said, her voice as soft and melodic as he remembered. Enter. Myri did not wait. She let out a small, happy gasp and stepped across the threshold. Jean hesitated for a second longer, then followed, his heart pounding in his ears. The air that hit him was the first shock. It was not the dry, recycled air of the station. It was warm and moist, carried 100 different smells. There was the rich scent of soil, the sweet perfume of flowers, and a clean smell like rain on leaves. He took a deep, involuntary breath. It was the best thing he had smelled in years. The second shock was the garden itself. Seeing it through the window was one thing. Being inside it was another. The holographic sky on the ceiling was not a flat picture. It had depth with tiny, shimmering points of light that looked like real stars. The plants were not just glowing. They were alive. He could hear a faint, gentle hum of insects. He could see the subtle movement of leaves in a soft, manufactured breeze. The floor was soft, springy moss under his shoes. He was standing in a piece of another world. Myri was spinning in a slow circle, her mouth wide open, her eyes huge. Appa, she whispered. It's real. Sue watched them, her head tilted slightly. She seemed to be studying their reactions. Jean finally remembered the fruit packs in his hand. He held them out again. For you, he said, his voice rough. A welcome gift. Sue looked at the packs. She reached out and took them with a graceful nod. Thank you. She held them as if they were something rare and precious. Synthetic nutrient paste is efficient, but it lacks variety. Jean almost laughed. That was the truest thing he had ever heard. My name is Sue, she said, looking directly at him. I am Jean, and this is Myri. I know, Sue said. Her gaze shifted to Myri, who was now crouching, staring at a cluster of blue flowers that pulsed with light. Your daughter has a kind face. And a curious one. Jean felt his cheeks grow warm. Yes, about that. The looking. I am very sorry. It was not respectful. Sue considered this. She placed the fruit packs on a small, smooth table made of twisted, living wood. Observation is the first step to understanding, she said. You were observing. There is a difference between observation and intrusion. You did not intrude until now. Her words were simple, but they held a deep meaning. She was not angry. She had known they were watching, and she had allowed it. Myri pointed a careful finger at the blue flowers. Can I touch it? Sue knelt down beside her. She was so tall that even on her knees, she was almost at Myri's eye level. You may, she said, but be gentle. All life deserves gentleness. Myri reached out one small finger and very, very softly touched a petal. The flower's glow brightened for a second under her touch. Myri giggled with pure delight. Jean watched them. The tall, serene alien and his small, joyful daughter, connected by a glowing flower. The tight knot of worry in his chest began to loosen. You are a xenobotanist, Jean said, remembering the term from a station bulletin. I am a keeper, Sue corrected softly. She stood up and gestured to the room around them. These are not just plants. They are memories. They are from my homeworld, from a place that is gone. This is all that is left of some of them. A deep understanding settled over Jean. He looked around the glowing garden with new eyes. It was not just a collection of plants. It was a museum. It was a library of life. It was a memorial. He knew what it was like to lose a world, even if his was just the small world of his family. I am sorry, he said, and this time he meant it for her loss. Sue nodded, accepting his sympathy. It is why I am here, to remember, and to make sure they live. For the next hour, they walked slowly through the small, dense garden. Sue showed them a plant with leaves that changed color when you hummed to it. Myri hummed her favorite nursery rhyme, and the leaves swirled with pink and gold. She showed them a tree with silver bark that felt warm to the touch. She explained that the little flying creatures were not insects, but tiny, simple life forms that helped pollinate the flowers. Jean did not say much. He just listened and watched. He watched his daughter's face, alight with a wonder he had not seen in her since her mother was alive. He watched Sue, who spoke about each plant with a quiet, deep love. He felt the warm, living air on his skin. It was the most peaceful he had felt in a very, very long time. Finally, he knew it was time to go. Myri was starting to yawn, though she was trying to hide it. We should let you rest, Jean said. Thank you for letting us see this. Sue bowed her head slightly. You are welcome here. As they walked back into the stark, gray hallway, the difference was shocking. The air felt thin and cold. The hum of the station sounded harsh. Their own apartment felt small and empty. Myri was practically floating with happiness. She's so nice, Appa. And her garden is the best thing ever. Can we go back tomorrow? Not tomorrow, Jean said, helping her out of her jacket. We must not be a bother. But as he tucked Myri into bed that night, she was still smiling. Good night, Appa. I love you. I love you too, Myria. He turned off her light and went to the main room. He sat in the quiet, looking at the plain gray walls. For the first time, the gray felt less like a prison and more like a blank page. The memory of the warm, glowing garden was like a light inside him. Sue was not a problem to be managed. She was just a person, a lonely keeper of lost things. Just like he was a keeper of his daughter, he had spent so long building walls to keep the world out. He never considered that someone on the other side might be building a garden. A new rhythm began in Jin's life. The gray walls of his apartment did not feel so heavy anymore. He found himself humming while he prepared meals. Myri's drawings were now full of blue glowing flowers and tall, smiling figures with shiny skin. The memory of the garden was a warm light he carried with him a few days after their visit. A soft chime sounded from their door console. It was a message. Not a station alert, but a personal one. Jin's stomach fluttered with a nervousness he had not felt in years. He opened it. The message was from Sue. The words were simple and direct. The lull bloom is opening tonight. Its light is rare. You may enjoy it. You are both welcome after the evening meal. Myri, reading over his arm, jumped up and down. She wants us to come back, Appa. She does. Jean felt a genuine smile spread across his face. It felt strange on his muscles, like something he had not used in a long time. It seems she does. That evening, the walk to Sue's door felt different. There was no fear, only a quiet excitement. When the door hissed open, the warm, living air washed over them like a welcome. Sue greeted them with the same calm grace. She led them deeper into the garden, to a plant they had not seen before. It had a large, closed bud the color of a deep night sky. The lull bloom opens only once every 30 cycles, Sue explained in her soft voice. It responds to silence and stillness. The three of them sat on the soft moss. Myri, for once, was completely quiet, her eyes fixed on the bud. Jean watched too. He felt the stillness of the garden settle around him. It was not an empty silence. It was a full, living silence, filled with the soft hum of life. Slowly, as if breathing, the petals of the bud began to unfurl. A light spilled out from the center, a soft, silvery light that was both cool and warm at the same time. It was not a bright light, but a gentle glow that seemed to make the very air shimmer. Tiny motes of light, like dust from the moon, floated from its center. Myri gasped, but it was a hushed, reverent sound. The silvery light touched her face, and she looked like a dream. Jean looked from his daughter's awestruck face to Sue's serene profile, lit by the otherworldly bloom. In that moment, he felt a peace so deep it was almost painful. This was beauty. This was connection. He was not a lonely father. He was not a tired maintenance worker. He was just a man, sharing a moment of wonder. When the flower was fully open, bathing the whole corner of the room in its ethereal glow, Sue spoke quietly. It is said its light shows you what you need to see. Jean did not know what that meant, but he felt it was true. He saw Myri happy. He saw a friend in Sue. He saw that his life could still hold moments like this. After that, their visits became a regular part of their week. Sometimes they would go for just a short while. Sue taught Myri how to mist the roots of a delicate, crystal-leafed plant without overwatering it. Jean would sit and sip a tea that Sue made from her own herbs. Tasted like sunlight and spices. They talked. It started with small things. The station news. The behavior of a new plant. But slowly, it grew. One evening, while Myri was carefully drawing a map of the garden, Jean was helping Sue gently tie a climbing vine to a support. His hands, used to rough metal and hard tools, were clumsy with the delicate plant. You are very patient with her, Jean said, nodding towards Myri. She reminds me of the young ones from my home, Sue said, her fingers deftly securing the tie. Full of life, eager to grow. It is a good thing to be near. It is just the two of us, Jean found himself saying. The words came out more easily than he expected. Her mother. She is gone. Sue's hands stilled for a moment. She looked at him, her dark eyes deep and understanding. I see, she said softly. To be a keeper of a young life alone is a great weight. No one had ever put it that way before. A keeper. It was exactly what he was. He nodded, a lump in his throat. My people are also few now, Sue continued, returning to her work. Our world is a memory. We are scattered. We are all keepers of what was lost. They stood there in a comfortable silence, two keepers from different worlds, tending to the living things in their care. Jean began to see the station differently. The constant hum was no longer just a noise to ignore. It was the sound of life continuing, just like the hum in Sue's garden. The gray corridors were not a prison. They were the paths that connected him to his daughter. And now, to a friend, he started to notice small, beautiful things he had missed before. The precise pattern of light on the metal grates of the floor. The way the stars looked from the observation deck. The sound of Myri's laughter. One night, as he was leaving for his late shift, he saw Sue at her door, receiving a delivery of soil nutrients. The container was large and heavy for her slender frame. "Let me," Jean said, stepping forward without thinking. He lifted the container easily. "Where does it go?" Sue directed him to a storage area near the back of her apartment. It was a simple thing, a small act of help. But as he placed the container down, he felt useful. He was not just an observer in her world. He could be a part of it. "Thank you, Jean," Sue said. Hearing her say his name felt significant. It was no longer just Myri's father. He was Jean. When he returned from his shift, tired and covered in grime from a broken filter, there was a small, insulated container by his door. Inside was a cup of the tea he liked from her garden. It was still warm. He drank it sitting at his small table, looking out at the cold stars through his own window. The warm tea spread through his body, easing the ache in his muscles. It was more than tea. It was a message. It was a way of saying, "I see you too." The fortress around his heart was gone. In its place, a garden was beginning to grow. The easy rhythm of their new life was broken by a sharp, mechanical sound. It was the kind of sound Jean knew all too well from his work. It was the sound of something breaking. He was in his apartment, helping Myri with a puzzle, when he heard it from next door. It was a high-pitched whine, followed by a clunk, and then an alarming hiss. A moment later, a station-wide alert chimed softly from his console. "Environmental anomaly. Sector 7G. Stabilizing. No action required." No action required for the station, perhaps. But Jin's blood ran cold. Sector 7G was their sector. It was Sue's apartment. He was at his door in an instant, Myri close behind him. "Stay here," he told her. His voice tight, he stepped into the hallway. A faint, cold mist was seeping out from under Sue's door. The beautiful, glowing patterns on the door were flickering erratically. Without thinking, Jean pressed the emergency override on her door panel. As a maintenance technician, he had codes for such situations. The door slid open with a jarring grind. The world inside was dying. The warm, humid air was being sucked out, replaced by the station's cold, dry atmosphere. A fine frost was already forming on the leaves closest to the door. The holographic sky was gone, replaced by the dull gray of the ceiling. The gentle hum of life was silenced. The only sound was the desperate hiss of air from a ruptured pipe in the corner, the source of the cold mist. It was a climate control line. Sue was in the middle of the garden. She was not moving with her usual grace. Her movements were frantic, desperate. She was trying to cover a large, delicate fern with her own body, as if she could protect it from the cold with her warmth. Her shoulders were hunched, and she was making a low, soft sound that Jean had never heard before. It was a sound of pure grief. "Sue!" he shouted over the noise. She turned. Her face, usually so calm, was etched with a pain so deep it hurt to look at. Her dark eyes were wide with panic. "The temperature," she gasped. "It is falling too fast. They cannot survive this cold." Jin's training kicked in. His eyes scanned the room, looking past the beautiful plants to the systems behind them. He saw the broken pipe, spraying its freezing coolant. He saw the main environmental control unit for the apartment, its lights flashing red. "I can fix it," he said, his voice suddenly calm and sure. "I need my tools." He ran back to his apartment. Myri was still waiting by the door, her face pale and scared. "Appa, what's wrong?" "Sue's garden is too cold," he said, grabbing his heavy toolkit. "I have to help." He ran back, his mind already working. He needed to stop the leak first. Then he needed to reboot and recalibrate the climate controls. It was a complex job, but it was his job. He went straight to the broken pipe. The freezing spray bit into his hands. He ignored the pain, his fingers working quickly, locating the manual shut-off valve a few feet away. He cranked it closed. The hissing stopped. The silence that followed was heavy and terrible. "The cold has already spread," Sue whispered. She was still crouched over the fern, which was now drooping, its vibrant green fading to a sickly brown. "I can get the heat back," Jean said. He moved to the environmental unit. He opened the panel. The wiring was a mess, a combination of standard station issue and delicate, custom work that Sue must have added for her plants. He worked. He worked like he had never worked before. This was not just fixing a machine. This was saving a world. He could hear Myri, who had crept in, talking to Sue in a small, comforting voice. Appa can fix it. He fixes everything. He rerouted a power coupling. He bypassed a fried sensor. His hands were sure and steady. He could feel Sue's eyes on him, filled with a desperate hope. He could not fail. After what felt like an eternity, he closed the panel and entered the reboot sequence. The unit whirred. A light flickered from red to yellow, and then to a steady, blessed green. A low hum started up. A moment later, warm air began to flow from the vents. A weak cheer came from Myri. But Jean knew the fight was not over. He turned to Sue. The heat is back. But the plants? Are they okay? Sue slowly stood up. She moved from plant to plant, her slender fingers touching leaves and stems. Her face was a map of sorrow. Many of the smaller, more delicate flowers were wilted and blackened. The leaves of the singing tree were curled and brittle. The lull bloom's silvery light was dim. Some are gone, she said, her voice hollow. The young ones, the most fragile. She stopped by the large, crystal-like flower, the first one Jean had ever seen her tend. It was still standing, but its light was faint and flickering. She placed a hand on it, a gesture of love and loss. Jin's heart ached for her. He had fixed the machine, but he could not fix the damage. He felt like he had failed. Then, Sue turned away from the crystal flower and looked at him. Her eyes were shiny with unshed tears, but they were clear. They were focused on him. You came, she said softly. You knew what to do. You saved what could be saved. She walked towards him, stopping just a few feet away. The garden was a wounded place around them, but it was alive. The warm air was still flowing. The holographic sky flickered back to life, showing a soft, dawn light. You did not have to, she continued. But you did. You saw my world breaking, and you fought for it. Jean just looked at her. He saw the gratitude in her eyes, a gratitude so deep it shook him. He had not been just a neighbor helping out. He had been a soldier in a battle for her heart. In that moment, surrounded by the evidence of both loss and survival, something shifted between them. The friendship, the quiet understanding, it settled into something stronger, something unbreakable. Sue looked at the garden, then back at Jean and Myri. It is damaged, she said, but it is not lost. We can rebuild. Together. Jean nodded, a feeling of fierce determination filling his chest. Together, he agreed. The garden was quiet now, but it was a different quiet than before. It was the quiet of healing. The frantic panic was gone, replaced by a slow, determined purpose. The air was warm again, but it carried the sad scent of burned leaves and lost blooms. Frost was gone, but in its place was the visible damage. It was a room of survivors. Jean did not leave. He sent a tired Myri to sleep in her own bed, promising her they would help Sue more in the morning. Then he returned, his toolkit still in hand. Sue was moving slowly through the garden, her fingers gently assessing each plant. The root systems for the larger trees are likely intact, she said, her voice low but steady. But the undergrowth, many of the flowering plants are gone. Tell me what to do, Jean said. And so they worked. Jean was not a gardener. He was a fixer. Sue gave him simple, clear tasks. He carefully cut away the blackened, dead parts of plants with a pair of her delicate shears. He cleared the fallen, wilted leaves from the soft moss floor. He stabilized a support trellis that had been weakened by the sudden temperature change. He worked in silence, following her gentle directions. He watched her. She did not cry. Her grief was a quiet, practical thing. She mourned each lost plant with a soft touch, then moved on to the next one that might still be saved. Her strength in the face of such loss filled him with a deep respect. As he worked, he saw the garden not just as a beautiful place, but as a system. He saw how the water was circulated to the roots. He saw how the lights were timed to mimic a day and night cycle. He saw the complex network of life that Sue had built. It was a machine as intricate as any on the station, but this one was made of life. The cooling pipe, Jean said after a long while. It was old. The metal was fatigued. It was not your fault. Sue looked up from the base of the silverbark tree. I know, but knowing that does not bring them back. No, Jean agreed softly. It doesn't. When the worst of the damage was cleared, they sat together on the smooth rock where Sue often sat. The garden looked wounded, but it was clean. The spaces where plants had died were empty, but they were not hopeless. They were like a promise for something new. Thank you, Jean, Sue said. She was looking at her hands, not at him. You saved more than the plants tonight. He waited for her to continue. When the cold came, I felt it all again, she whispered. The loss of my world, the feeling of everything I loved turning to dust. I was frozen. I could not think. I could only feel the end of things. She finally looked at him, her dark eyes deep and honest. Then you were here. You were so calm. You knew what to do. You showed me that an ending can be stopped. You reminded me that I am not alone in this fight. Jean understood. He had felt that way after his wife died. That the world had ended, and he was alone in the cold with a child to protect. No one had come to fix his broken world. He had to learn to fix it himself, piece by piece. You are not alone, he said, the words feeling completely true. We are your neighbors. A small, real smile touched Sue's lips for the first time that night. Yes, you are. The next day, Jean went to the station's botanical exchange. It was a place he had never been, where species from different worlds were traded. He used a large part of his saved work credits. He did not know what to buy, so he described the lost plants to a specialist and came home with a small box of resilient seeds and young sprouts that could thrive in Sue's environment. When he presented them to her, her reaction was not what he expected. She did not focus on the new plants. She looked at the empty spaces in her garden, then at the box and then at Jean. These are not replacements, she said carefully. They are new. They are different. Jin's heart sank. Had he made a mistake? That is good, Sue continued, her smile returning. It is better. We are not trying to rebuild the past. We are building the future, a different future. Myri became their chief helper. Her small hands were perfect for patting soil around the new seedlings. She took her job very seriously, whispering to the new plants to grow up big and strong. The garden was no longer just Sue's sanctuary. It was their project, a shared thing. Weeks passed. The new plants began to grow, adding their own shapes and colors to the garden. The surviving plants, strengthened by care, grew back even stronger. The garden was different, but it was whole again. It was alive. One evening, they were all together. The garden was filled with the warm, golden light of the simulated sunset. Myri was asleep, curled up on a soft mat of moss, her head resting on Gom the bear. Jean and Sue were sitting together, drinking tea. Sue looked around the thriving garden, then at the sleeping child, and finally at Jean. This garden was a memory of a home I lost, she said, her voice soft in the quiet. I thought I was only a keeper of the past, but I was wrong. She reached into a pocket of her simple tunic and pulled out a small, closed pot. It was made of the same warm, twisted wood as her table. She handed it to Jean. He took it. It was warm. He could feel a faint vibration coming from within the soil. Open it, she said. He carefully lifted the lid. Inside the pot, a single plant grew. It had a strong green stem and two small, heart-shaped leaves. And from its center, it emitted a soft, steady golden light. It was a simple light, but it was full of warmth and strength. This is a new species, Sue explained. It was born here in this garden after the cold. Its seed came from one of the plants that survived. It is a child of this place, of our place. Jean stared at the little plant, his throat tight. He understood. This was not a piece of her lost world. This was a piece of their world, the world they had built together on orbital deck 7. A piece of my home, Sue said, echoing her words from their first visit. but now they had a new meaning. For yours. Jean could not find any words. He just nodded, his eyes feeling hot. He held the pot carefully in his hands, feeling the gentle warmth and the soft light against his skin. Later, back in his own apartment, he placed the little pot on the table in the main room. The soft, golden light pushed back the gray, filling the space with a gentle glow. It was not a bright light, but it was enough. It was a living light. He looked from the sleeping plant to his sleeping daughter in her room. He was a keeper. He was a keeper of Myri. And now he was a keeper of this new, growing light. He was not just looking in from the outside anymore. He was a part of something beautiful. The garden was next door, but its light was right here with him. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough.